Still focused on the reaction to the first quarter labour force survey that's indicating that 0.8 percentage point drop in South Africa's unemployment rate. Economist at Dawn Consulting Group, Chifipa Mhango, joins us now. Thank you so much for your time, Chifipa. Is this drop what the market expected, given that there had been some optimism about a return to somewhat business as usual in the first quarter of this year, following the harsh economic impact of COVID-19, of course, which exacerbated the precarious economic position of South Africa's economy, Chief?
I must say the drop at 0.8% came in quite surprisingly, but I think nonetheless the figure of 34.5% unemployment rate, it still remains quite high if you compare relatively to some of the economies across the globe. So we're still in the areas of concern with regard to the level of unemployment in South Africa at this stage.
Chief, you do note that the unemployment rate in South Africa at over 30% remains a matter of national concern. How then should it be addressed, as it hasn't historically been tackled?
Well, it's quite a challenging task at this point, especially on the environment where we've had a number of policy interventions that are trying to address the challenge in terms of unemployment. But I think one has to look at where the problem areas are in terms of unemployment numbers. So, for instance, if you look at the youth unemployment, it is quite high at over 60%. You're also looking at women employment, it's also quite high compared to all the other genders. And then you're also looking at the African population, which is also heavily impacted by the numbers in terms of what you're seeing. So any kind of interventions to address the areas of concern has to look at how do we address unemployment amongst the youth through, for instance, access to business financing, as well as skills upliftment. This also touches both the women population as well as the African population. So the interventions that cut across the key areas where the concerns are from the demographics, I think it would be much more important at this stage.
And earlier, Chifipa, I had a conversation with the South African Youth Economic Council, just talking about the number of youths in South Africa that form part of the almost 8 million that are still without jobs. And again, looking at the increasing cost of living, particularly given the rise in the petrol price that we are facing at midnight. Even though we have that fuel levy holiday extended, it's still going to be quite challenging for the youth to continue to seek jobs in this particular climate. What's to be said about the near-term outlook when it comes to South Africa's jobless rate going forward?
It's quite a concern, especially one has to look at the absorption rate of the youth employment numbers. We're still sitting at 9%. We're still sitting at 9% in terms of labor absorption for the youth employment numbers. So that tells you that for that to change, we need to really move way above the 9% absorption rate of the youth. So that's where the concerns are. But as I said earlier on, the lack of skills in the key segments of the South African economy, where the absorption rates in terms of employment are quite high, that's also where we need to focus on that, especially in the manufacturing sector, where you're seeing the numbers actually quite improving drastically. About 263,000 jobs being created. So to bring in the youth in that space of the economy actually requires upliftment of skills and also internship to be aggressively approached in that sector of the economy.
We'll leave it there for this hour with economist at Dawn Consulting Group, Chifipa Mhango, and